The opening line of one of President Biden's new executive orders says it's his administration's policy to, quote, make evidence-based decisions guided by the best available science and data. The data he refers to will fuel every agency's risk management operations and the government's as a whole. Cynthia Vitters is Managing Director of Leader Enterprise Risk Management Practice for Government Public Services at Deloitte. She's former Chief Risk Officer at the Department of Education. Cynthia, welcome. It's good to see you again. Is there something about a transition period like we're going through now that makes ERM more useful or more necessary?
Yeah, Francis, as you know, a transition period is a critical period of time when new leadership and appointees are being named into new positions, and they're being asked to get up to speed on all aspects of agency operations in very short windows of time. The transition process includes naming new staff members, creating new policy agenda, and for this particular administration and presidential transition, it's also included naming a new COVID advisory board. There are thousands of real-time decisions that will have to be made from the moment that the new president takes office. During this period of time, a key deliverable that's produced from an enterprise risk management program can be extremely useful for new leaders to leverage as a source of information. The most notable is an enterprise risk profile, which you and I have talked about many times. This is a document that's a comprehensive of the most significant risks that an agency is facing, but it also includes the agreed upon significance and likelihood of each risk of occurring, how well they're being mitigated, and also who is accountable for managing that risk. This provides an overarching snapshot or window into an agency's risk exposure and how it impacts the mission, strategic goals, and operations of the agency. Gathering and synthesizing this type of information could take months for a new leader to collect. However, the important point here is that since most federal agencies have developed risk profiles and processes and frameworks for managing risk, all of this can be leveraged by new leaders as they come into the organization to help them better understand the landscape and the risks that should be monitored and tracked on a real-time basis.
Cynthia, you and I talked a little bit offline about the challenge that organizations are up against, maybe, and it's mostly, I think, at the middle and lower levels. When people think about risk management, they leave out the enterprise part, and they're thinking about what is the risk exposure that we have to this one particular thing rather than coronavirus. How does that fit into kind of a matrix of all of the risks that an organization is up against? What's the risk profile is one thing, that's the mechanism. What's the mentality shift that agencies should be doing to break out of that, to get their people to understand this is a mosaic and not one individual tile?
Yeah, and it's a very important point, important question that has been going on for quite some time out there. And I think that what you're really getting at is that there's some confusion around the difference between enterprise risk management and traditional risk management, which agencies have been doing for decades. Traditional views of risk management think about risk more individually, and they place responsibility on an individual business leader to manage risk within their area of individual responsibility, also thought of as siloed risk management. Let me give you an example. You might think about a chief technology officer being responsible for only managing risks related to the organization's IT operations, but not thinking about the broader impact and the enterprise impact that those risks may have on the organization. Again, the idea behind ERM is looking at it from a holistic portfolio view, most significant risk to the entire agency. It seeks to create a top-down enterprise view that might impact, the whole agency. So again, attempting to create a full view of all risks impacting the enterprise. It's important because it allows leaders to see the interconnectivity of risks, but also forces them to evaluate the significance and likelihood from an enterprise view.
So I don't mean to get too philosophical on you, but as you're describing that, I'm thinking the model that I've tried to think about when I'm approaching a risk management conversation like this is a matrix where down the one side you have the risks and you have the potential outcomes going across the top or whatever. As I'm hearing you describe it, I'm still thinking about it wrong because there's a depth behind each of those also. This is a cube and not a square that people should be thinking about, right?
Absolutely.
What does one do, again, to change that mindset, to get people to understand that maybe they've been doing it wrong and that has to change?
Again, Francis, I think it's just, spending time, working with key leaders to help them understand, the value, the power of looking at it across the entire agency, across the whole portfolio view. When they start to see the interconnectivity, I think that, some magic is sometimes found and made through, seeing what happens when you put all of this information together.
All right, we have about a minute left. What is back to the transition idea. How does the risk landscape change or evolve pre, during, and after a transition like we're in right now, Cynthia?
Yeah, another great question. Two main topical categories to think about during periods of transition. And the way we think about it is two buckets of risk. The first is human capital risk. That's the risk that agencies don't have the right people with the right skills to do the activities needed to carry out mission. During transition, employees are coming, they're going, they're taking on new positions, they're exiting old, and it can take time for new appointees to be operating in full capacity. Collectively, this can create an increased exposure of risk in that particular area. Second category to pay close attention to is operational risk. This is a risk that an agency can't successfully execute or administer programs or operations needed to fulfill its mission. Two aspects of this to think about. One, career employees need to feel empowered to make decisions. Again, as agencies work through transition, you see career officials taking on temporary or acting roles as new leaders arrive. These individuals need to be able to continue to make the significant decisions that they need to on a real-time basis. The second aspect of this increased exposure is the lack of possible preparedness to execute new policy agenda. To be better prepared for this, we encourage agencies to closely monitor new policy changes, what operational changes might be necessary to execute programs, new and existing programs. So again, Francis, key consideration with all of this is for agencies to be aware of potential changes in risk posture and exposure as they're experiencing any kind of change. It can be transition, it can also be a significant change like, COVID-19 crisis. Keep a close eye on how the risks are being looked at, thought about, monitored, managed, and mitigated to reduce the overall likelihood of occurrence.
Cynthia, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Francis. Nice to see you.